Native Americans, indigenous peoples of Reddit. What's it like to grow up on a reservation in the USA? I grew up between the Salt River and Gila River reservations around Phoenix, Arizona. When I was a kid it was pretty fun having such a large area to just walk around with a BB gun and no one cared where you were or how long you were gone for. We could dig in the ground and find broken pottery from other generations, which is pretty crazy to think about now. There were a lot of drunks who would show up at our house at 2 AM and my grandparents would help them out with food or a place to sleep. There was only one little gas station store to get groceries along with a smoke shop. I generally have good memories of being there. We now have casinos, which really helps the community provide for itself. Our tribe focuses on building the community and gives very little to individuals in per capita distributions. Other tribes give more money to their members, but it seems like that causes more drug and crime problems. My tribe has the highest rate of diabetes in the world, or at least it did when I wrote my capstone research paper on it for nursing school. We spend a lot of money on hemodialysis. There is a ton of death. We dig our own graves by hand. Compared to other funerals that I have gone to off the reservation, there is something very special about digging your loved one's grave. Being in the ground, inhaling the dirt where your family member will soon rest. It's powerful. I live in the city now, but I return frequently to visit family. I grew up on the Rosebud reservation in South Dakota. It was fine, I guess. After moving off the reservation I realized that everyone was poor, but my family just happened to be slightly less poor since both my parents worked a lot to try and give us a good life. It felt like a small town with a lot of culture that is very important. People flocked to powwows, rodeos, sporting events and whatever was going on. If it wasn't that, then the older folks were drinking. I don't ever want to go back. There's just no opportunity there. I grew up on and off the res and I've always had mixed feelings. Yeah, there's a lot of alcohol and drug abuse, but you know, me and my cousins were better off than most other families. I knew about the fights, stabbings, people's parents who OD'd. I never had to see those things, but everyone knew about them. We just kinda dealt with it using humor. Only recently when I left for school did me and my friends from other reservations have started to deal with it. I think a huge part of the res fricked upness is due to a lack of education. I feel bad sometimes cause I know I was a pretentious little crap. I thought I was smarter than people on my res because I got to go to a predominantly white school. The res school system is crap. When I went to school there they wanted to boost 6-year-old me into the 5th grade. I wouldn't say the kids don't want to learn, they just think school's a waste of time because it doesn't teach them well, or anything they think is valuable. I will say it's much cooler when you get to learn where to dig roots, go fishing and hunting, and learn your language from your grandparents rather than hear about the mitochondria. The resources just aren't available for the students to apply themselves off the res. I think depending on your family the experience can vary. My mom's family is pretty traditional, so I see a lot more culture surviving and that's cool. I had a lot of freedom as a kid, befriending res dogs and riding my bike down the creek, having airsoft wars in the horse pasture, going rafting down the rivers. So as freaked up as the res is, I had a great time. I love my home, despite all the problems. And there's a lot of problems that can really frick you up if you're not careful. I didn't realize it wasn't normal to see your auntie get beat, walk in on your dad passed out with bottles, seeing your grandpa deal pills down the street, or have to go to 9 funerals in 1 month. People are still healing and I don't think the problem can be solved through a single way. My mom always preaches about ceremony in college, and it works for some people, but others have had to deal with way more BS. I don't know what people need. I think about it a lot and it'd make me happy if people could get off the res more, but from what I know people hate it. Being off the res sucks sometimes. People don't get your sense of humor. People treat you weird and you have to tell non-natives that we exist all the time. They either put you on some weird pedestal or tell you you're drunk. IDK, sometimes the res ain't that bad if you avoid your M-head relatives. I grew up on the Navajo Nation, the largest reserve in the US. All my family still reside in the area, but I got to leave for college. For the most part, you are isolated from everything civil. We did not have running water or electricity until I was about 10. My father and uncles had jobs 10 hours away and would make frequent weekend trips home, and the nearest town is probably a good hour drive. I did not realize how difficult our lives were until I moved away for college. As children, we had a vast open landscape as our playground. We hiked, camped, played tag, all without boundaries or worries that strangers were lurking. It was a close-knit community, and families were clustered across the reservation. For example, if you were to visit a family friend, then you could pretty much walk on over to visit their grandparents, siblings, etc. I would make frequent trips home during college, and suddenly there is a disconnect between you and your home. You leave home impressed with this overwhelming grief. Not only is alcohol rampant on the reservation, but the quality of life is just unbelievable. Payday loans, fast food joints, and packaged liquor govern the Navajo people. These border towns are the only outlet we have for groceries and supplies, but the convenience of all these establishments leave us in an unhealthy state of mind. Like someone said, it's a vicious cycle and it becomes evident when a close friend or family is absorbed. I currently live in a pretty isolated reserve way up in northern Canada, so I'm sorry that I'm not quite who you were asking. The living conditions are pretty awful. The trailers' houses are very run down and often just plain dirty. People get animals they can't afford and allow them to reproduce to a point where we probably have more dogs than people. The res dogs are the worst BC. They are violent and not cared for. We have no animal control, so people don't care and let their animals run free. Many of the people here are either on drugs, alcoholics, or had too many kids to afford to leave. Most of the people here have never graduated high school. Most only make it to grade 10. Imagine all the stereotypes you hear about my race and you'll get a pretty good idea. Not all the reserves are ugly and run down. I've been to a few that are very nice and where the houses are actually suitable for living. The people have their issues, but they aren't bad people. We were all raised on this idea that what we label ourselves as, druggies, alcoholics, etc., is all we can ever be. I thought it was normal to have children in your teen years because that's all I was exposed to. I like to think that there is hope for my home to restore the sense of community and clean this place up, but there's a reason all the people who were able to leave never came back. I tried to do what little I could by tutoring students for free while I tried to balance school and work, but it wasn't really enough. I graduated high school this year, and I am leaving for university at a school a good 24 hour drive away from home, and I'm not sure that I want to come back. Sorry for my answer being blunt, but it's the truth for my reserve. I hope this isn't true for any others. I'm from a reservation in WA state and I'm half Native American. It's not that bad here. The thing is, all tribes are different. There is a lot of H&M abuse. Generally, the dealers are not the native people, but a lot of the users are. My sisters are all addicts. Other than everyone having a bunch of broken down cars, it's not much different than a small town. I start work as an attorney for my tribe, as in-house counsel, next week. The tribe has paid for everything for me. They fully funded my undergrad at a top private university and they funded my law degree. They pay for my healthcare. They pay for each kid to have school clothes twice a year, 300 twice a year. They have their own food bank and resource center, a gym with personal trainers. You get the gist. I was born and grew up on the Bad River Reservation on Lake Superior in northern Wisconsin. I lived in a house my mom's grandpa built in the 40s for the first couple years of my life. Then my grandpa and family friends built a new house in the 80s. So that is my childhood home. My grandpa and uncle lived down the road in my childhood and they would harvest wild rice and trap muskrat and beavers. The boat launch was under a mile from my house and even closer to my grandpa's land, so I would go out with them a lot. He would sell the quilts and wild rice at his smoke shop he had on the highway. We had a casino built on the res when I was about 10, and that was a big deal. There was a trailer park in the res and that is where most of my friends lived, but it was on the other side of the river and you'd have to either drive or get wet to get there. I worked at my grandpa's smoke shop until it closed in 1996. We participate in powwow weekends, selling quilts and wild rice. Powwows are a good time. Family comes who don't live on the res, mainly scattered around Wisconsin, Minnesota. I lived in Milwaukee for a couple years as I attended community college and lived with a friend from the res. We brought some friends we met in the city up north and they said it was not how they imagined it. It's pretty normal, we're just all really poor. Bad River Reservation just outside of Ashland, Wisconsin. Come check out the casino, I'll be at the bar. So my tribe isn't federally recognized, only state recognized. However, I will still speak on it. I moved to my tribal area to obtain my master's degree and it's very different from the city I grew up in. I work in a little shop in town, and the amount of people who come in drugged out or drunk is staggering. There also seems to be a big divide between culture and religion. I live in the south, so there are a lot of churches here. The church natives don't agree with the culture that was established before Columbus made contact, and the spiritual people don't believe in church. I've heard nasty comments from both sides. However, it's one of the most loving communities you would ever know. I could be standing in line somewhere and within 5 minutes a stranger will have a complete conversation with you, pray for you, and tell you to have a good day on top of all that. Back home, strangers really didn't talk to anyone they didn't know. Lac du Flambeau, Wisconsin. I just turned 20 about 2 weeks ago. Lots of drug abuse, teen moms with multiple children, high unemployment, generations of dysfunction, police corruption, government corruption. Oftentimes it's easier to find opiates and amphetamines than it is weed. Essentially your average poor small town. We have our own public school. There's always a few white kids in every class so it can't be too bad. There's not much to do outside of outdoors type stuff and drugs. We have exclusive rights to hunt and gather year round so that's always something. I went to a high school that included 4 other schools from around the area. It was a pretty decent schoolimo. Plenty of opportunities. My mom is expecting her 5th child from a 3rd guy in September. She's 43 or something. All me and my siblings have asthma because she smokes while pregnant, and I expect her newest to have FARS. I'd say around 50% of my 40-person grade school class has or is expecting a child. Take that however. Anyone can come and go as they please. Most people stay because the res is a safe place. Pretty easy living with only minimal effort required. The actual res area is beautiful and decently expansive. It's a pretty alright place if you keep to yourself. Also I prefer to be called either Indian or American Indian. Most natives I know, when talking to non-Indians, call themselves Native or Indian. I don't mind Native but I dislike Native American. I also don't care about mascot caricatures. I grew up on the Navajo Reservation, in the southwest, New Mexico to be specific, and spent a lot of time in Arizona as well. Some of the natural landscape can be truly amazing, but there is also all the isolation and typical issues that can be seen. Families that have to deal with drugs, alcohol, and crime. The size, distance, and location are all hard obstacles that add a lot of separation between services like jobs, healthcare, and even picking up day-to-day items. Cell service, internet access, and communication are all hit and miss in a lot of locations. Alaskan native Inupiaq here. Born and lived 8 years in Barrow, then 20 years in Fairbanks, now living in Anchorage. We don't have reservations but we do have villages that are mainly native. The biggest difference is economic. We didn't have much money, weren't raised with money, and as a result have poor spending habits coupled with half-assed schooling by newbie bush teachers. Financial stability is something that we struggle with no matter if you're Inuit or Athabascan or Yupik. This of course can lead to everything else mentioned in this thread: alcoholism, drugs, suicide, domestic violence, etc. You get the picture. It's getting better though. With each generation we're learning more. I spent my younger years living in and often visit the northwest area of Navajo Nation. Shipwreck. Unsure of the statistics but there's certainly high rates of unemployment, alcohol, drug abuse. However, plenty of people I know have gone to obtain a higher education, so I have hope that our people will prosper. It's a large reservation so experiences vary. I'm full-blooded Navajo and grew up on the Navajo Reservation in the US. Most homes have no running water, no electricity, and driving 40 miles to the nearest town is the highlight of anyone's week, possibly month. It sucks. 1/10 do not recommend. Didn't grow up on a res, but spent a lot of time there. I'm native but we lived in government housing. I had family on the res so I spent a lot of time there. Couch surfed for a few years as a teenager. When I was little the res was like a third world country. No hot water and governor, cheese, etc. I actually had a blast though. Always got to ride 3-wheelers, shoot fireworks, and everybody knew everybody else. They started getting money per cap when I was a teenager. Things changed a lot but not for the better. Man, they got some nice toys but people became phony and began to fight all the time. Not just when they were drinking but like when they were sober too. I'm from one in South Dakota. It's a sad place. I'll always love it because it's where I'm from. But it's hard to go back. The M addiction there is terrible. That and the assumptions I deal with living in the city I am nowadays is annoying. They assume because I'm from the res that I get everything free in life. Not the case. I grew up on a reservation in Minnesota. I left when I became an adult. Basically has the same stuff as rural towns. No good paying work, lots of drug abuse, except the benefit of a Superfund site next to the town. That's a huge chemical leak that no one can afford to clean up. It leads to a lot of cancers. My father died of a cancer associated with it. The good is there's a strong sense of family in the community. My fiance grew up there as well, but has a much bigger family. They are all there for each other and it's amazing what people can do in groups like that. The res culture is something I didn't even realize until I left. I said slang words no one understood and had an accent. Both me and my fiance have lost those accents. Don't tell her, but she gets it back if she drinks or is mad. I have never had to pay for healthcare, ever. Checkups, surgeries, meds, even emergency things. Had to be life flighted once. No bill. I understand while people were made about Eka, but it didn't affect my life. My name is Brandon. I am 22 and I am a Navajo who grew up on the Navajo Nation my entire life. My mom is a kind-hearted woman who works at a school and my dad is a strong, very upfront man. He spent 30 years working industrial construction being an iron worker, pipe fitter, welder, and he says he was a journeyman and a foreman on many of his jobs, but now he works at the hospital in the town I grew up because he says the work he did in those years really took its toll on his body. I consider myself very fortunate that my parents don't drink and that they attend the Native American church. Growing up my father was very rough on me and my older brother. As a 6-year-old we would learn to ride horses and the purpose was for work like rounding up cattle or heading sheep. We worked on the fence lines as children and we would haul wood and coal because we used a stove. My dad used to tell me men don't cry and that if I'm ever going to be somebody that I needed to learn everything he knows, so I did not play much as a kid. I spend weekends helping him change fuel pumps or he would be working with the horses. We were doing something productive and it was hard. My father's side of the family are all drunks and some even do M. He lost 3 of his brothers to drunk driving and his dad shot his mom multiple times, then shot himself in the head in front of him when he was 6, so I understand why he is the way he is, but there are still times I resent him. My mother's side of the family are all teachers and educators, so my mom is very nurturing. It wasn't until I was around 19 that I started to appreciate the way I grew up, but I constantly think about the lack of friends I have and the lack of memories of being with the ones I had, and it's always difficult because they are just not many of them. The Navajo Nation is simple in that you either grow up like how I did or you grew up wishing you grew up like how I did, because mom and dad were constantly drunk and leaving on the weekends to go spend the weekends at a casino. There is really no middle ground with an understanding, soft-spoken father and mother who understand that children need to be children and aggression is not a way to teach, but it's there and it's rare. I envy these parents. You have been visited by the wealth rat. Subscribe in 12 seconds and he will share his wealth with you. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day you magnificent people.